Good evening, everyone. It is now 6:30 p.m. and I call the meeting to order. The first order of business is electing the chairman and vice chairman for this calendar year 2023. I would now request nominations for the chairman from this group. Thank you, John. So John Zabel nominated. Any seconds?
I'll second it.
Tom Zarkowitz second, and all in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Thank you. Welcome to yet another year, Chairman. We really enjoy working with you, and you may now elect the vice chairman for tonight.
Okay, thanks, everybody. I enjoy being part of the group. So now, I guess, next order of business is to nominate and elect a new vice chairman. Is there a nomination on the floor? Tom Zarkowitz.
I'd like to nominate Steve Law for vice chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Steve Law unanimously elected
Thank you.
as
Thank you.
vice chairman. And now on to the
Hello? Yeah. So I did pass on the rules of order. Mio kept it on your desks. So please review this and come back next month to vote on this. If you think of any changes or any additions to be made, I have to clarify with our council clerk on who the secretary would be. Like, is it the town staff, or should we have to elect from this group another secretary? I don't know. So we'll have to figure out that one. And if you would like to add any, I mean, Mio was just mentioning that the council clerk mentioned to her that you can add some time limits for discussion so that the meetings are more efficient, so that each person gets 3 minutes time to summarize, and there's no redundancy in offering the comments to the applicants, especially when you have 4 or 5 applications. That comes handy. So please think about this and come back next month to vote on this. Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to, I guess, move on with the next order on the agenda, and that is 885 Wood End Road ARB application, review of petition to zoning commission by Corian Industrial for the construction of a 33,000 square foot commercial warehouse at 885 Wood End Road. Is there someone here for the applicants?
Yes, there is. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Ms. Susmitha, how are you? My name is Robert Rosati. I'm an attorney here in Stratford with my father, Thomas Rosati. Our office is at 3241 Main Street. I'm here with Mr. Brian Carey of Land Tech and Kim Deckin, I'm sorry, of TK Studios. They're going to carry the ball. I'm just going to introduce them. This site, I think you all know, is a overgrown 2-acre piece approximately down in Wood End Road. That the end proposal here is to build a 33,000 square foot light industrial warehouse on that property that fully complies with all the zoning regulations except for a small encroachment into the 50-foot zoning wetland setback. Prior to this, Mr. Carey went to our Inland Wetlands Commission and received a permit, their approval, to relocate and replenish the wetlands for this project to go forward. That's been approved, that permit's been obtained, but the end result is the new wetlands, again, the project, the building's going to fully comply except for a corner of the parking lot that's going to be in the 50-foot zoning wetland setback per 3.14 of our zoning regulations. And our zoning variance application, which is going to be heard February 7th, next month, triggered the referral to you guys, along with a CAM and a harbor management referral. So we're lining up all our applications and all our referrals, so we can hopefully get that variance granted, and then apply for a building permit to construct this warehouse, which again is a permitted use and fully complies otherwise. And I won't take up any more time. I'll introduce Mr. Brian Carey at this time.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't have an easel. I always forget this room doesn't have an easel, and I should know that. Again, thank you. For the record, I'm Brian Carey from Brian Carey of Land Tech. We have offices in Westport, Connecticut. So as Attorney Rosati said, we're looking to build a 33,000 square foot light industrial commercial building on the lot at 885 Wood End Road. The lot is approximately 2.39 acres. The lot itself has been historically filled. It's on the corner of Wood End Road and Sunset Avenue. As you probably know, the area is zoned for heavy industrial. The lot itself is heavily wooded with invasives, vegetation, and the past filling, there is actually a significant amount of garbage on the property that we look to remediate during the construction process. There are 3 wetland units on the project. The idea was to actually fill the small area. It's a man-made wetland that was formed within the fill soils. These are both man-made wetlands that developed in the fill soils. We're actually going to fill this wetland, which we did receive approval from through the Inland Wetland Commission, and we're going to complete a wetland restoration and enhance the existing man-made wetlands on there. On the site to increase their functional value of the wetlands themselves. As I said, the whole site has been filled. It's all been mapped as Udorthan's urban complex. There has been phase 1 and phase 2 done on the property, and the site does need some remediation that will be completed during the site work on the property. The building itself, I won't go too far into the architectural aspects of the property, but we are compliant for parking for the zoning regulations. We have 3 loading docks. All of the stormwater generated as part of the proposed impervious surfaces will be directed into an underground Coltex storm chamber unit, and that is also compliant with the town of Stratford's engineering requirements for the 25-year storm. We did look at alternatives for the site. The no-build alternative was something obviously the site itself is heavily underutilized. I would even say it's a blight in its current condition, even though it isn't developed. There's fencing along the roads, all the invasive vegetation. It's just it's an eyesore in an area that is a bit of an eyesore in itself. So we looked at smaller and larger alternatives. The applicant, this does meet all of their requirements. They do have a proposed tenant for the building already. So there is a bit of a time frame aspect to get this built, because they want to get it built and leased to their tenant as soon as possible. As part of the project, we were required by the Inland Wetlands Commission to come up with an extensive mitigation plan. A lot of teeth during the process. We do have an extensive planting plan. Doesn't really pop out at you so much because most of it's sedges and grasses that will be planted into the restored wetlands. But we are, meeting the guidelines for the ARB for the street trees. I've had a pretty good history in Stratford for through personal experience. The trees that we've selected are sycamore and honeysuckle. the next best thing other than the elm tree. The honey locust is also a great tree because it is very hardy, low maintenance, and it doesn't drop a lot of leaves in the fall, so it doesn't cause a lot of problems, especially in an industrial area. Won't cause any sightline issues. All the plantings actually set back onto the property, so it won't become a problem for the town in the future for the tree ward or future maintenance. Again, this is what we think it's an economic and aesthetic benefit to the neighborhood. And I can really answer any questions you may have, but we're excited about this project. And talking with the economic development director, I think they're pretty happy with the economic benefit that this would bring. There's just some sheet details here, and I will answer any questions, but I would let Kim discuss the architectural aspects of the project. And then we can open it for questions.
Before you proceed, can we, Mrs. Smith, wants to chime in on one thing?
Yes, so I got curious about this property's location because in the flood zone and in the limber zone, limit of
Yep.
moderate wave action zone, it looks like it is in the limber zone boundary and also in a flood zone, which means that you would have to elevate this property to FEMA standards.
That's correct. We are. So there is a significant fill associated with the development of the site. I think we're proposing 13,000 yards of material to be brought in to the property. It is compliant
I
with
thought the building itself
first
has
floor
to be.
elevation.
I don't know, I have to check.
Yeah. So that fill was approved as part of the wetlands permit. The first floor elevation is a foot above base flood elevation. We did have discussions with Brian Donovan as part of our submission to the ZBA.
Say that it has to be built to V-zone standards or AE zone standards? Because I thought it has to be open in the bottom floor for
Yes.
water to flow in and flow out.
Correct. And I think we discussed that. Yeah, so those architectural, I don't know if it was BE or AE zone. You are correct, it is in the BE zone.
No, it's, I think, in the AE zone,
I think the
but
line-
anything in limber zone is subject to V-zone construction standards and not AE zone. So I think, I don't know, I mean, did Brian tell you that you have to leave some walls open for water to come in and go out, or no?
I think there was some reinforcement that was gonna have to.
Yeah, when we get to the actual.
Wait, you need to step up and identify yourself, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim Decken from TK Studio in Mullica Hill, New Jersey. I'm the architect. So once we get to the actual construction documentation and development of this, we can have it so that there is the required amount of flow going underneath the foundation. No, the slab elevation will remain at the 1 foot above the BFE. It's that the foundation on the columns will have the ability for the water to flow underneath. It won't necessarily be a full solid foundation wall like it appears in the rendering. It would have the ability to meet the standards.
Okay.
So
Similar to like how at like the shore and stuff, there's the piles and then like either it's totally open or it has the flood vents that go through.
So it would be similar construction to the Stratford Development FedEx building that was built on North Ship Boulevard, same type of, you do plan on filling. That was one of the challenges, is to make the grading with the amount of fill that's gonna be placed, to allow the trucks to come into the site.
You're sure Brian looked at this, right? You may want to double check with Brian Donovan on the whole thing.
Yep.
Because in the past, there was a property that was approved and later they realized that Connecticut DEP wasn't approving the designs.
Right.
And then, it just became very problematic for them.
If I could respond to to that, there's, I spoke to Dan today. This definitely was sent out to a deep referral. The variance application triggered that. And we're also waiting for Brian's comments, the building department's comments in connection with our variance application. So I'm sure it's all going to be addressed with those comments and with our zoning application and with the permitting process. And it was also discussed with wetlands as well.
Okay.
But thank you.
Okay. You want to go ahead with and proceed with the architecturals?
Okay.
Is that the next? Okay.
Robert Rosati, again. And there was a CAM application also.
All right, so can you hear me okay if I'm here? Okay. So this is the architectural floor plan that just kind of gives you an idea of, from the site plan, this is the loading area. This is the ramped up front entrance because the elevation is so much higher than grade. And then this is the warehouse area. So that kind of summarizes that. And then just to kind of give you an idea of like the line drawing of the elevations to show how that is working out. And then we can flip to, it's a little easier to talk about with the renderings. Flip it. So this is the front area. So we are trying to take a look at, it's all insulated metal panels, and we are using a series of just colors and color, size, and texture to create like the rhythms so that it's not just the big monolithic walls, but also it's still warehouse. And so we have the entrance has an awning just sort of for human scale, same with over the loading docks. And then we tried to put the accents at the corners along the street so that it gives it a little bit more appeal. You can kind of see on the back side as well. This is the side that faces nothing. But on the street side, it has a little bit more articulation and a little more accenting. The area around it contextually is all industrial, so we think that this conforms with that aesthetic. And like I said, we use the panel size, color, and texture to create the building rhythms, break up the facades a little bit, and still keeping minimal materials, but having some patterning on the monolithic walls. And that's kind of it, unless you have more specific questions about the aesthetic.
Okay, thank you. I think we can move on to our commission members. Tom Sharkert, you want to start us off tonight?
trucks coming into the loading dock very difficult. So the idea is we didn't want to add more impervious area that adjacent to the wetland, since we're already complying with parking. So this will act as, if you have seen it, it's like a geotextile that will be planted, will be grass. There's a detail on the back, I'll show you. So it will just allow the trucks to utilize that as a turning radius if needed. So they'll come in here and then they can back up this way if needed. But that's only so the idea with the plantings that we did choose is that they are, they will grow on even though they're perennial plants, they'll grow large on an annual basis, and then they'd be cut in the fall to actually help disperse the seed, the seeds around the site, so you'll get kind of over a period of time, you'll have a good strong seed bank. We're not, we understand that the site itself was heavily infested with invasives, and the historic seed bank itself would be a problem. So as part of the inland wetland process, we did submit a extensive invasive species management program that will be implemented on for 5 years until the site is established. So we did take a bunch of time to come up with a plan that we thought was germane to the site, but also feasible for long-term maintenance and establishment.
One thing I will critique is, not that I have a problem with the honey locust, but I think the London plane and the sycamore is the nicer tree. And if you were to replace the honey locust with more London planes, you sort of build a rhythm. You start creating an alley down the road.
Right.
Which creates a sense of place, which is what we're always going for.
So the reason from an arboricultural perspective why you don't do that, why I did not do that, is because of a blight issue. American, not to get into the whole history, but American elm, when Dutch elm disease came, and there were just a monoculture of elm trees, and people think of the hairy and Osiate subdivisions back in the day. The reason why those all died so quickly is because Dutch elm disease was able to go, it transfers through the roots. So when you have a monoculture of trees down the same road, if a specific blight comes in that affects that one particular species, it ends up resulting in what can be a clear cut. If you go down to, we had a problem on Coxon with Norway maple. The whole street was planted a monoculture of Norway maple. And at the point where they all reached maturity, 50 years later, every single one of them needed to be cut down. So the idea was to create some biodiversity in the planting scheme, but I completely understand that from an aesthetic standpoint, but I have no problem changing that.
I totally understand your point made, and I do agree with it. I'm still going to push for
Yeah.
the London plane all the way through. In terms of the architecture, is there any signage that's going on the building?
Not at this time. That would come when there is a tenant that is secured or a building owner, then that would have to come back for a re-review, because at this time, there's no one to occupy it to put signage up.
I only ask because these are very broad facades.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that you tried breaking it up with different colors and all that, but some signage could create some interest.
Sure.
Some projection.
And I think we would not be opposed to, just without having anyone occupying the building, even do some signage maybe on one of the accent corners that's just like the number, like 885 or something like that. Exactly.
I think that would be a fine addition, but I'm going to let other commissions.
Sure.
Okay, Shannon Hovan.
Yes.
Yes. So that's the area that's going to have to get designed when we get into the actual construction area. At this time, it would theoretically be a concrete foundation. However, it's not going to be able to be a solid wall like that once we design how the water passes through.
The other thing is, we have not completed, because of the variance, we didn't want to go out and do all the geotechnical requirements for the foundation design until we knew we were going to get the variance, just because of the cost associated with that. So the actual foundation, concrete slab, how that is going to be constructed is still up in the air until we do the final geotechnical for the property. Yep. So the mechanicals have not been designed. We still, I still don't know the tenant, because they're in the process of signing the lease. Once we get their requirements, we will reach out to the utility companies to determine the best way and the needs of the leasee, what they're gonna require. But we would, vegetative screening, fence, I mean, we would make it architectural. We want to build something that is basically going to be a keystone property in an area that's already kind of, I don't want to use the word depressed, but depressed. So we are sensitive to that. But again, I would imagine that they will be placed in an area here, so that they're near the building and can be protected. We'll put in some, visual screening either through vegetation or some type of enclosure.
Sure. Yeah, and in terms of the HVAC, we really won't be able to define that without the tenant, because it could be someone that needs nothing but some gas-fired Resner heaters within the building footprint, and you'll see nothing from the outside. So once that's defined, we will be able to better place it. Sure. No, that would all be dependent, because with the warehouses, until there's a tenant, sometimes there's literally a single office and toilet room, and that's all that they're needed, and sometimes they fit out, however much square footage they need, and the plumbing will be dependent on what their need for code on that. Those were added to show emergency exits. When we have a tenant, we'll be able to better define where they would be required, but those were added on the architectural just to show where there would be possible emergency exits for egress.
So,
There would be an emergency light on those, because they wouldn't be used for any sort of regular pedestrian in and out. They would just be emergency only.
so just, so based on, I know a lot of this is based on getting that variance and then learning who the tenant is. We will obviously need site plan approval. We're trying to determine if we'll need special permit approval based on the use. But we will have that extra level of detail once we know who the tenant is on the plan, including a lighting plan, which will be required for site plan approval. But we'll design it around the needs of the actual tenant. Security is obviously a big issue, and what they're going to need for security at the site, we don't know yet. We have no problem if you guys make a recommendation or request to see those plans as far as any future approval to the site plan. We do that regularly.
John Zabel?
Good evening. Thanks for the presentation. I'll echo the other commissioners' comments. I definitely like the color scheme, the way you've attempted to break up such a large mass. Following on what Shannon said, because again, there are certain things that you've admittedly said haven't been incorporated yet because there isn't a tenant, but understanding the neighborhood, as Brian has pointed out, is there fencing planned for the rest of the property? I know there's a current fence we've talked about. It's in some rough shape. Or are you planning to fence the property for security purposes, or that'll be tenant-based again?
It will be tenant-based, but my suggestion would be to minimize the amount of fencing. I mean, we don't want to put fencing, up along the right on the property, along the right-of-way. I think most of the tenants nowadays, they want the parking lot fenced in. So we'll have to figure that out based on the tenant. And,
Sure, and that's something if you go to our design guidelines, we speak pretty strongly against chain link, wrought iron where possible, vinyl, again, just something to spruce up the property, again, with the nature of the building. Like we said, we like the architectural design, not to minimize the property by throwing up a chain link fence if possible, again. Similar with the lighting, site lighting, the portions of the building are so close to the street or will be so close to the street. Again, our design guidelines speak to directional lighting. Certainly the zoning board has regulations relative to lighting, so you'd be following those. The one thing I wondered, again, Tom spoke to the trees. Is there any way, again, understanding we appreciate how the building looks and its character relative to the property, about possibly doing a little bit more screening than a tree to the loading dock? Because the building, the entrance is really nice, the way you've broken it up, the way you've built out the corners. It's just a shame that you're turning the corner and whammo, there's the loading dock like right up on the street. If there's any way to visually screen that, bushes, hedgerow, just something to kind of not detract from the character of the rest of the building with the loading dock right there, because it will not be, again, based on the elevations, it won't be going down into the property. It'll be pretty much level if I'm reading the elevations off the plan correctly.
So this is pretty steep slope right here, but
Comes up from the street.
yeah, so this is coming up, so if you're looking at from the street level comes up, I have no problem, we can put in some backside landscaping, in this area. The only reason I'm hesitant to put in a bunch of shrubs along here is because it just gets, I hate to say it, just becomes a mess. There's shrubs in there, you can no longer mow it and grab the garbage, and, you just have a hedgerow that's all garbage underneath.
Sure.
To try to put in some extra vegetation in here, that's not a problem. But in my experience, maintenance is a huge issue on aesthetics.
No, understood. I just think the visual aesthetics there, you look at that rendering and you kind of put your hand over that and you're like, wow, this is a really nice building, and then you realize there's 3 loading docks there.
I agree 100%. I think we tried to maximize the amount of green space as much as possible, given the size of the building and the limitations on the site. One of the things we were sensitive about was actually, the view shed coming down Wood End Road to the building. Sunset Avenue in itself is challenged. So, I think, trying to vegetate this and make it as visually appealing coming up through adding vegetation, we can absolutely look at adding some additional low-lying vegetation in that area. We could even talk about having, some type of requirement for them to do, annual plantings or something like that. because most of that's in the snow shelf too.
And then the grass paved two system, what's the transition look like that? Look like
There-
an asphalt?
There's actually a little lip, there's a concrete lip, it's like a curve like this that holds that system in place between. So basically there's asphalt paved up to a concrete lip. That's put in, it's kind of like
with the sidewalk?
yeah, it's kind of like a level spreader.
Okay.
So, the, yeah, curb, so that's what actually locks that system in, when you build it. So you have a transition from asphalt to a curb, like basically a curb. In really low situations, that can almost be a timber, but this would be something that would be concreted in, so that it's, at the same elevation. If that makes sense.
Steve Law?
Steve Law, Vice Chairman. Yeah, I was a little bit confused by the grading. It seems like the building elevations, the 2D elevations, and the renderings didn't quite sync up for me, and I was trying to understand how that was. But as Shannon pointed out, the base of the building in the rendering looks like it's much shorter than in the 2D drawing. So can you just kind of explain that we're kind of manipulating the grade based on FEMA
That's correct.
regulation, grade like you're creating a base for the building civil?
That's right. So it's very similar to a lot of the way a lot of the recent Stratford development buildings have been built, where they actually will fill in and then elevate the building above base flood elevation.
So flood water then
Goes
somewhere
around,
else,
that's correct.
and that's no issue with deeper paving?
We'll see.
Yeah. Because I was kind of struggling to figure out, it seems like it's a relatively flat site now.
There's a lot of, I don't have the existing, did I submit the existing A2 survey? Yeah, it's filled significantly. It's inconsistent.
But there appears to be like a 6-foot drop at that northwest corner.
Yeah, that's right.
And then as Shannon points out, those exits, we want to make sure those exit doorways are not just looking like fire escapes. Like there's one in the.
They're not on the rendering, they're on the
Yeah.
plans. On the elevations. Yes. And I think the intent would be, once all of the grading is finalized and we know exactly where that's falling, the stairs wouldn't just be a standard industrial sort of like prefab metal or a concrete stair. We would have a more architectural looking railing, similar to what we would put along the front.
So the flood vents, does that mean there's a crawl space under that first floor? Or the water
No,
will
it,
come in and then go out, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so you'll have some flood vents that'll be on the exterior elevation.
correct. Once we have all of the requirements that we're trying to meet, then we'll have to work with our structural engineer to figure out exactly how we're going to meet those requirements with the different, there's flood vents, there's all different ways to accomplish it that would have some sort of openings to allow the water to pass through. It will just be dependent on what they decide the final requirements are.
So the other thing to note is that the applicant, they normally build and lease, they don't build and sell. So they normally build and lease their buildings. They don't normally divest a lot of the properties that they build. So I always find that kind of a little bit more advantageous. So, because they have an interest in keeping the property well-maintained and aesthetically pleasing rather than, building something that you're just gonna get rid of, and they don't put the time and money in there into the property to make it look good, knowing that they're gonna continually have to maybe go out to lease it in the future.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the effort that went into designing the elevations. They're, I'm sure ultimately they'll be successful. One comment though, it seems like
that point is noted. We did go through a full feasible and prudent alternative process with the inland wetland application, because we did look at, we're sensitive to that. We didn't want to have this canyon effect. So that, you know, the idea of adding more landscaping on that side is noted.
Was there any consideration of having the office section on the Woodland Road side?
From a site planning, we didn't look at that yet.
From an architectural standpoint, just to bring the face of the building.
Sure, the only reason, we kept it where it was so that it had access to the parking, so that we weren't having people park and have to go around the entire building. But I have worked with this applicant on a lot of their South Jersey portfolio, and I think that if it was something that the board really wanted, they would be agreeable to considering maybe some clear story windows or something along that side of the warehouse.
Okay, yeah, like I said, I was a little bit confused, but now that I understand the grade was manipulated for the floodplain. So, and I just want to echo, I think it was Tom or John's comment about the signage, if we could.
Sure.
We may be a little preliminary review, we may want to see this again, but, I think that's all I have for now, Jimmy.
Okay, Jamie Miller, Chair. The only one that I'll say is that you offered up the possibility of the clear story windows along Wood End Road, and I would say that, you know, I totally agree with that one, to kind of make that north elevation a little more appealing. So that's really the only other comment I have. I still just do have a question, though. And Steve asked if it meant you were going to have a crawl space, and I thought I heard you say no, but you're allowing floodwater to pass underneath this slab, correct? So you're going to have, am I understanding, how is, because your floor is at 15, you need to let the water go through underneath the building. So are you suggesting there's, concrete piles and reinforced concrete deck and floodwater can flow underneath that whole building?
If that ends up being what the requirement is to meet the flood requirements, then that's how we would accomplish that. If we can do it where the floodwater goes around, then we don't have to do that at all, and we can keep it solid. If there's a requirement that may be part of it and it can be achieved with flood vents and not the entire thing has to be, it's going to depend on what the
Okay. Well, flood vents implies a crawl space too. I mean, flood vents
correct,
don't
but
work
if it's only for like a portion of the building,
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't know what what they're going to require.
Okay.
in
I mean,
terms of how
it's
much
not
water, but
really
yes.
necessarily part of our purview, but I'm just understanding, boy, if you're doing a reinforced concrete slab, and it's a pretty expensive industrial building.
Exactly. It's-
Okay. Other than that, I don't have any further comments. So, any other further discussion or questions from our commissioners? And any other further commentary from the applicant?
Just real quick, we received the wetlands permit, we received a positive recommendation from Harbor Management last week. We need your recommendations now for our February 7th Board of Zoning Appeals variance application. And we thank you for scheduling this meeting. Before that, you went out of your way to do that. Thank you. And that's all I'm going to say. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for the application and the presentation. So, I've been taking some notes here. So, or is Tom?
Tom?
Well, then, Tom, you have. So, would you like to take a shot at a recommendation, Tom?
I would like to make a motion for a favorable recommendation of the following proposals. To replace the honey locust trees with linden, pine, and sycamore trees to create a windmill along Woodend and Sunset Avenue. Consider signage to greater approximate size. Address signs would be appropriate at 10 and 12. Mechanicals and utilities are to be screened by vegetation, evergreen, or by fencing,
Pretty comprehensive, thank you, Tom. So, hey, all in favor? All opposed? So that, oh, right, discussion, that's right, you do have, sorry.
Can't ask them to come back. Unless you have not made your decision. Usually the process is, they only get one chance. Well,
Right now, the plan, the way it is, with the tenant in mind and the use in mind, we do not need a special case application. We just need the variance. So if it sticks to that, I think we're good with you guys. If we have, if the use or the tenant triggers a special case application, then we'll be seeing you again. That's my understanding.
Fair enough. And I think that, we're kind of discussing internally here that, there's no requirement for you to come back before our board, but I think, you guys, first time maybe in front of us, and I think that we would like to think our job up here is to make for better and more beautiful buildings and properties in this town. And so if you so choose to want to come back to us and for our further input, we would welcome you.
If it
How about
helps us
that?
with our other applications and gets the project built, we'll come back and see you guys.
That's a plan. Okay.
Thank you.
So now we can vote. So all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay.
Okay. And so that passes unanimously with one abstention. And I believe that is all we have for this evening. Do I have a motion?
Seconds.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
So Monday, we have the health